The first thing I noticed was the empty chair across from her. Not her dress, though it was the kind of deep green that made every man in the restaurant suddenly remember he had eyes. Not the way she kept smoothing the napkin in her lap, like she could iron the humiliation out of the evening. Not even the small birthday candle the waiter had placed beside her dessert menu, probably trying to be sweet and making everything worse. No, I noticed the empty chair because I knew what it meant. Somebody had let Claire Whitaker sit alone under soft restaurant lighting for 42 minutes. And then, as if the universe wanted to test whether I had become a better man since high school, she looked across the room, recognized me, picked up her purse, and walked straight toward my table. Her voice was barely louder than the piano near the bar. "Can I sit here?" I'm Miles Callahan. I was 32 years old, single, and at that exact moment, halfway through a steak I'd ordered because my apartment was too quiet, and my refrigerator contained one bottle of mustard and a suspicious lime. I worked as an exhibit technician at the Riverside History Museum, which meant I spent most days hanging old photographs, repairing display cases, and making sure antique farming tools didn't fall on school children. It was steady work, quiet work, the kind of work that suited a man who had gotten very good at being useful without being noticed. Claire Whitaker, on the other hand, had been impossible not to notice. In high school, she was the girl who made ordinary hallways feel like movie scenes. Not because she was loud, she wasn't. Claire was the kind of pretty that didn't ask permission, but what ruined me completely was how she treated people. She remembered locker combinations for freshmen who were crying. She laughed with her whole face. She once helped me carry a broken cello case across the parking lot during a rainstorm and said, "You look like a man saving a drowning giraffe." I loved her for 3 years and told absolutely no one, which tells you most of what you need to know about teenage Miles Callahan. I was the quiet kid with the sketchbook, the one teachers trusted to run errands and girls described as sweet, which is basically romantic witness protection. Claire dated a basketball player named Robbie Lane senior year. I fixed the backdrop for prom. She danced under lights I had hung with my own hands. That was as close as I got. After graduation, she disappeared into life the way people do. College, work, a marriage I heard, then a divorce, though I didn't know the details and didn't go looking. I saw her once at a gas station 7 years ago, but she was on the phone crying, and I pretended not to see because some moments deserve privacy. Then there she was, standing beside my table at Marlowe's on a Friday night, trying not to look like the whole room had just watched her get rejected. "Of course," I said too quickly, then stood because my mother had raised me with some basic equipment. "Please." She sat across from me. Same empty chair, different table. Up close, she looked both familiar and completely new. Her hair was shorter than it had been in school, brushing her jaw in soft waves. There were faint lines near her eyes now, the kind earned from squinting into sunlight or pretending not to cry in public. She smelled like vanilla and rain. "Hi, Miles," she said. "You remember me." Her mouth lifted, but it didn't quite become a smile. "You once built a cardboard castle for the winter formal and accidentally trapped Principal Haney in the fake drawbridge. In my defense, that drawbridge passed inspection. It was made of duct tape. Strong duct tape. That did it." A real laugh escaped her, small and surprised, and I felt something in my chest loosen that had been tied up since I was 17. Then her eyes went shiny. She looked down fast. I glanced toward the bar, pretending not to notice, because there is a kindness in not staring directly at someone's pain. "Do you want me to ask for another menu?" I said. "I don't know what I want." She swallowed. "That's not true. I want to leave, but if I stand up right now, I think I'll become a story at every table between here and the door." I looked around. Nobody was openly watching, but plenty of people were pretending not to, the worst kind. "You're not a story," I said. "You're just having dinner with an old friend." Her eyes came back to mine. Old friend was generous. We had been classmates, occasional project partners. Two people who shared a town and a few inside jokes. But the way her shoulders dropped half an inch told me she needed the word, so I let it stand. "Is that what we are?" she asked softly. "If you want." The waiter appeared, young, nervous, holding his little tablet like a shield. "Ma'am, should I still keep the other place setting, or—" I saw Claire flinch. I didn't think. I just smiled at him and said, "We're good now. Could you bring her whatever she was drinking before? And maybe pretend this is all extremely normal?" The waiter blinked, then nodded, like I'd handed him a sacred mission. "Absolutely, sir." Claire covered her mouth with 2 fingers. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. That's dangerous." "What is? Being kind when I'm already embarrassed? I might start crying and ruin your steak." "My steak has seen worse." She laughed again, but this time tears slipped free before she could stop them. She turned her face toward the window. Outside, headlights moved through the wet street, blurring into gold. Inside, the restaurant kept clinking and murmuring around us, unaware that my entire past had just sat down across from me and asked for shelter. I handed her my clean napkin. She took it, then stared at it like it was more intimate than it should have been. "Thank you," she whispered. "Claire," I said carefully, "you don't have to explain anything." "I know." She dabbed under one eye. "But I want to. Because the terrible part is, I almost didn't come tonight. I sat in my car for 10 minutes telling myself I was too old to be nervous about a first date. You're not too old. I'm 32. I'm also 32. Yes, but men get to call it distinguished. I assure you, nothing about me eating alone beside a fake fern was distinguished." This time her smile stayed. Then her phone lit up on the table. She looked at the screen. Whatever was written there drained the little color she had left from her face. I didn't look. I had manners. But I saw her thumb hover, trembling slightly, and I saw the reflection of the message in her eyes. She turned the phone face down. "Miles," she said, voice thinner now, "would you do something strange for me?" I leaned forward. "Name it." Claire looked past me toward the entrance, where a man in a gray blazer had just walked in with another woman on his arm. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "Please," she whispered, "pretend you're my date." For one ridiculous second, I forgot how hands worked. Claire's fingers were cold. Not dainty, not helpless, just cold. The way hands get when someone has been sitting alone too long, pretending they are fine. Across the restaurant, the man in the gray blazer laughed at something the woman beside him said. He had the relaxed posture of someone who had not spent the last hour wondering if every waiter pitied him. Claire's grip tightened. I covered her hand with my other one, gently enough that she could pull away if she wanted. "Okay," I said. Her eyes flicked to mine. That was all. "Okay." No grin, no joke, no performance. Just a small word set between us, like a chair pulled out in the dark. The man saw her then. I watched recognition hit his face. Not guilt exactly, more like inconvenience. He slowed near the host stand, and the woman with him followed his gaze toward our table. Claire lifted her chin. Her smile appeared, bright and terrible. I had seen that smile before. Senior year, when Robbie Lane forgot her birthday and showed up to school wearing the sweatshirt of the girl everyone said he'd been flirting with. Claire had smiled exactly like that in the cafeteria while tearing her sandwich into pieces she never ate. It was the smile of a woman determined not to give anyone the satisfaction. "Miles," she said softly, still smiling, "the man approaching us is Adrian Cole." "Adrian Cole," I repeated, like a person learning the name of a storm. "We matched on a dating app. He chose this place. He said he might be late because of a work call." "Work call looks nice in red." A laugh escaped her through her nose. "Don't make me laugh. I'll either cry or snort." "I support both." Adrian stopped beside our table. He was handsome in the way expensive watches are handsome, polished, intentional, and slightly cold. The woman beside him had perfect hair and an uncomfortable expression, as if she'd walked into a room where everyone knew the secret except her. "Claire," Adrian said. "Adrian," she replied. His eyes moved to our joined hands. I did not squeeze Claire's. I did not puff up. I did not become the kind of man who mistakes a woman's humiliation for his audition. I simply stayed. Adrian cleared his throat. "I texted you." "You did," Claire said. "I was trying to explain." "You wrote, 'Something came up.'" The woman in red looked at him sharply. Adrian shifted. "This is complicated." Claire's smile widened by a fraction. "Not from here." There was a silence so crisp I could hear the candle on my table flicker. Adrian's gaze moved to me. And you are? I felt Claire's hand tremble, so I smiled. Not smug, not challenging, just calm. Miles Callahan? Adrian waited as if expecting a title that would make me matter. I gave him none. Claire looked at me then, and something in her face changed. The panic didn't vanish, but it found a place to sit down. Miles and I went to school together, she said. We reconnected tonight. The woman in red folded her arms. Tonight? Adrian made a small warning sound. Tessa. No, she said, turning to him. You told me you were meeting clients before dinner. Claire's eyes dropped. I hated that. Hated that she was witnessing not just her own embarrassment, but someone else's betrayal unfolding beside it. As if the night had decided one wound wasn't enough. Tessa looked at Claire and her face softened. I'm sorry. Claire blinked. Those two words did what Adrian's excuses could not. Her chin quivered once before she steadied it. Me too, Claire said. Adrian glanced around, aware now of the nearby tables pretending to discuss wine while breathing through their ears. This isn't the place, he muttered. No, Tessa said. It really isn't. She stepped away from him and headed for the exit. Adrian stood frozen, his whole evening collapsing in public. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then he looked at Claire and said, You didn't have to make this dramatic. Claire went very still. The air left her body in a quiet, stunned breath. I knew that kind of sentence. It was the kind that shoved blame into the hands of the person already bleeding. Before I could decide whether speaking would help or only make it worse, Claire withdrew her hand from mine, not because she wanted distance, because she wanted to stand. She rose slowly, smoothing that green dress with both palms. Her voice, when it came, was low and steady. I sat at that table for 42 minutes, she said. I checked my phone 11 times. I told the waiter twice that you were on your way. I smiled at strangers because I was afraid if I didn't, I'd look pathetic. Adrian's mouth tightened. Claire continued, Then you walked in with another woman and somehow still expected me to protect your comfort. Every table near us had surrendered the pretense of not listening. Claire's eyes shone, but she did not cry. I'm not making this dramatic, she said. I'm refusing to be invisible. Adrian had no answer for that. He adjusted his blazer, which seemed to be the only apology his body knew how to make, then turned and left. The restaurant exhaled. Claire remained standing for 1 second. 2. Then she sat down as if her bones had been cut. I reached for her water glass and slid it closer. Breathe first. She laughed once, shaky and disbelieving. Did I just give a speech? A good one. My knees are vibrating. That's because they're applauding. She pressed the napkin to her mouth, and this time when she laughed, the tears came with it. Not graceful tears, real ones, the kind that bend your shoulders. I wanted to touch her arm. I wanted to do anything that would make the hurt smaller. Instead, I asked, Do you want to leave? Claire looked toward the door, then back at me. No, she said after a moment. I don't want him to decide how this night ends. The waiter returned with her drink and a face full of solemn loyalty. On the house, he whispered. Claire looked up at him. Thank you. Trevor, he said. Thank you, Trevor. He nodded as if knighted and disappeared. Claire wrapped both hands around the glass. I'm sorry, she said. You came here for a quiet dinner, and I turned you into a fake boyfriend in a public morality play. Honestly, this is the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months. That's sad. I work around taxidermied owls. She smiled into her drink. For a while we said nothing. The piano shifted into something slow. Rain tapped the windows. Across from me, Claire breathed herself back into her body. Then she looked at our hands, no longer touching but close. You were always kind, she said. The words landed somewhere deep. In school? I asked. Quiet, but kind. Her eyes met mine. I noticed. My heart, foolish old thing, forgot every lesson adulthood had taught it. You did? Claire's smile was tired, tender, and a little sad. Miles, she said, you thought nobody saw you, but I did. There are sentences you wait half your life to hear. Then, when they arrive, you have no idea where to put your hands. You thought nobody saw you, but I did. I stared at Claire like she had just opened a door in a house I thought had burned down years ago. You saw me? I asked. Her fingertips traced the rim of her glass. You used to draw in the margins of your history notes. That could have been anyone. You drew Mrs. Bell as a pirate queen during the unit on colonial trade. I winced. That was private satire. It was excellent satire. Claire leaned back, the first real warmth of the evening coming into her face. And you always held the side door open in the mornings because the hinge stuck. You acted like you were just standing there, but you waited until everyone got through. I looked down at my plate. All these years, I had remembered her as sunlight. I had never once considered that sunlight might remember the dust. I had a crush on you, I said. The words slipped out so simply that I almost didn't realize I'd said them until Claire went still. Great, perfect. A woman had just been stood up, publicly embarrassed, and emotionally drop-kicked by a man in a blazer, and I had chosen this as the moment to unpack a teenage confession. I sat up fast. I'm sorry, that was badly timed. I'm not saying it because of tonight. I don't expect Miles, anything, and I don't want you to feel cornered, because that's the last thing. Miles. I stopped. Claire's expression was soft, not frightened. I know. You know, you looked at me like I was a stained glass window. Heat climbed my neck. That sounds unhealthy. It was sweet. Then after a pause, and a little tragic. I was 17. Tragic was my main setting. She laughed, but something fragile moved behind it. The waiter came by with menus and Claire ordered soup because she said her stomach was too dramatic for solid food. I ordered coffee, though I didn't need it. I needed something to do besides look at her too long. We talked carefully at first, stepping around the broken glass of the evening. She told me she worked as a speech therapist at an elementary school across town. She helped children find sounds that had gotten trapped somewhere between their hearts and mouths. The way she described it made the work sound like unlocking tiny doors all day. I told her about the museum, about repairing a Civil War display after a third grader sneezed directly into a case and set off an alarm, about the old widow who came every Tuesday to sit beside the train exhibit because her husband had proposed to her at that station. Claire listened the way she always had, completely. No phone in her hand, no eyes wandering the room. Just me, somehow worth the attention. After a while, she said, "My divorce was final 2 years ago." I didn't speak. I let the sentence breathe. He wasn't cruel in a loud way, she continued. Not the kind people understand. He just made me feel excessive. If I was happy, I was too much. If I was sad, I was exhausting. If I asked for affection, I was needy. By the end, I apologized before entering rooms. My chest tightened. She gave a humorless little smile. So, tonight was supposed to be proof that I could try again. Wear the dress, say yes, sit at a table and not feel ridiculous for wanting something. You're not ridiculous. Her eyes lifted. I said it again because some truths deserve witnesses. You're not ridiculous for wanting to be chosen. The candle between us flickered. Claire's face crumpled for half a second before she caught it. I'm tired of being brave in restaurants, she whispered. That one nearly undid me. I wanted to reach across the table, but I made myself ask, would it help if I held your hand again? She looked at me for a long moment. Then she slid her hand into mine. This time, it wasn't for show. Her palm fit against mine with a quiet, terrifying rightness. We sat like that while her soup cooled and my coffee went untouched. I need to say something, I said. Okay. I'm still that boy in some ways, the one who would have done anything to be picked by you. I took a breath. So I'm going to be very careful tonight. I don't want to become another man who uses your hurt as a doorway. Claire's eyes filled again, but she didn't look away. I can be your friend, I said. I can walk you to your car. I can sit with you until this stops feeling so sharp. And if tomorrow you decide this was only a rescue raft in a bad storm, that's okay." Her fingers tightened around mine. "You make it sound easy," she said. "It isn't." "No, no." I smiled a little. "I'm being extremely noble and suffering internally." There it was again. That laugh that felt like a porch light turning on. When dinner ended, I paid before she could argue. Not because I wanted to impress her, but because the restaurant had become a battlefield, and I wanted her to leave it without one more negotiation. Outside, the rain had softened to mist. The street smelled like wet pavement and basil from the kitchen vents. Claire stood under the awning, arms wrapped around herself. "My car is 2 blocks over," she said. "I'll walk you." "You don't have to." "I know." We walked slowly, close but not touching. Halfway down the block, she stopped beside a dark shop window. Our reflections stood together in the glass, her in green, me in a wrinkled blue shirt, both of us looking like people who had survived something small and enormous. "I did notice you," she said quietly. "Back then." I turned toward her. Claire kept her eyes on our reflections. "I noticed you so much it scared me." She laughed under her breath, almost embarrassed. "But Robbie asked first, and everyone expected me to say yes, and you never said anything. So I told myself I'd imagined it." The mist gathered in her hair like tiny stars. "I've wondered sometimes," she said, "what would have happened if one of us had been braver." My heart beat once, hard. Before I could answer, her phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. Not Adrian. The name glowing there was one I didn't know. Claire declined the call immediately, but her hand shook. "Miles," she said, I don't think I can go home yet." "Okay," I said. "Not what's wrong. Not who was that. Not come to my place. Because even if every lonely part of me wanted more time with her, wanting did not get to drive. Just okay." Claire stared at the dark phone in her hand. "That was my ex-husband." The mist kept falling around us, fine as breath. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked. She shook her head, then nodded, then gave a helpless little laugh. "Apparently my neck has several opinions. We can sit somewhere public. Coffee shop, all-night pharmacy, extremely romantic bus bench." That earned me a small smile. "Coffee shop." We ended up at Bellwether Cafe, a narrow place near the old theater with fogged windows and mismatched lamps. A college kid with purple hair was mopping near the counter, and 2 nurses sat in a booth sharing fries. It was ordinary in the best possible way. Claire chose a table in the corner where she could see the door. I noticed. She noticed me noticing. "My ex is named Simon," she said, wrapping both hands around a mug of chamomile tea. "He has a sixth sense for when I start feeling okay." I sat across from her, my coffee untouched again. "You don't have to answer him." I know that in my brain. My body hasn't received the memo. Her phone lit up with a voicemail notification. She flinched like it had made a sound. "May I?" I asked, nodding toward it. She hesitated, then slid the phone across the table. I didn't pick it up. I just turned it face down and pushed it gently to the side, out of her line of sight. Her shoulders loosened. "Thank you," she whispered. For a while, we let the cafe hold us. Cups clinked. The mop swished. Rain tapped softly against the awning outside. Then Claire said, "He used to call after every date." I went still. Not because he wanted me back. He didn't, not really. He just wanted to know if someone else had managed to make me happy. She looked into her tea. And if they had, he'd remind me of some version of myself I was ashamed of. Too emotional. Too trusting. Too eager. He was very good at making Hope feel childish. I thought of her at that table, smoothing her napkin, waiting for a stranger who couldn't even be decent. "You are allowed to be eager," I said. Her eyes lifted. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the force in my own voice. "For kindness, for love. For someone who shows up when they say they will. That's not childish, that's human." Claire's mouth trembled. "I forgot you talked like that," she said. "I mostly talk to mannequins at work." "Still, you always said things like you'd thought about them for years." "Usually because I had." She smiled, but it faded quickly. Can I ask you something unfair? Sure. Why didn't you ever say anything back then? I looked past her to the rain-streaked glass. There was my reflection again, older now, but still with that same uncertain mouth. Because you seemed happy, I said, and because I was scared that if I told you, I'd lose the small parts of you I already had. What parts? Being your partner in biology, hearing you say hi in the hallway, making you laugh once every 6 weeks if the planets aligned. Her eyes softened in a way that made it difficult to breathe. Miles. I know, I said, smiling faintly. Tragic setting. No. She reached across the table, then stopped halfway. May I? I nodded. She touched the back of my hand. Just 2 fingers at first. I wish you had known, she said, that those small parts mattered to me too. Something quiet moved between us. Not the wild rush I had imagined as a teenager, but something deeper and more careful. A door opening slowly so nobody got hurt by the swing. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't flinch as hard. Claire looked at it, inhaled, and said, I need to listen. If I don't, I'll imagine worse. Do you want privacy? No. Her answer came quick, then softer. Would you stay? I'm right here. She played the voicemail on low volume, holding the phone between us. Simon's voice was smooth, familiar in the ugly way a bruise is familiar. Claire, I heard you were at Marlowe's tonight. I hope you're not making another impulsive mistake. You always confuse attention with affection. Call me before you embarrass yourself again. The message ended. The cafe seemed too bright after it. Claire stared at the phone. I wanted to throw it into the nearest river. Instead, I waited. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Then she laughed once, not because it was funny, because sometimes the body chooses the wrong exit. There he is, she said, right on schedule. I leaned forward. Can I say something unkind about Simon? Please. He sounds like a man who mistakes control for intelligence. Claire blinked, then a startled laugh burst out of her. That is so specific. I've worked with several cracked display cases. You learn to recognize pressure damage. She laughed harder, and a few tears spilled over. She wiped them away with the heel of her hand. Pressure damage. You're not damaged, I said quickly. I know what you meant. She looked at me, and her expression had changed. Still wounded, yes, but clearer now. That's the difference, you know. What is? You correct yourself when something might hurt me. I didn't know what to do with that except tell the truth. I don't want to hurt you. I believe you. Those 3 words were almost too much. The cafe worker called out that they were closing in 10 minutes. Claire glanced at the clock, surprised. Somehow 2 hours had passed. Outside, the rain had stopped. The whole street shone under the lamps. At her car, she unlocked the door, but didn't get in. I'm not ready for tonight to become tomorrow, she said. I put my hands in my coat pockets so they wouldn't reach for her without permission. We can slow it down. How? There's a place. Her eyebrow rose. The museum roof, I said. It's not creepy. I have keys and it has the best view of the river. Also several security cameras if that helps my case. Claire smiled. You're selling safety very hard. I am deeply committed to not seeming like a serial killer. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. I'd like to see it. So we drove separately to the museum because separate cars mattered. Choices mattered. On the roof, the city lay quiet below us, river black and silver beneath the bridge. Claire stood beside me at the railing, close enough that our sleeves touched. I felt safest with you tonight, she said. My throat tightened. In the worst, most embarrassing moment, she continued, I looked around that restaurant and there you were. The boy who used to hold the door. I couldn't speak. Then Claire slipped her hand into mine. Below us, the river carried the city lights away, piece by trembling piece. We did not kiss on the roof. At 17, I would have hated that. I would have called myself a coward all over again. At 32, I understood that some moments are not meant to be taken. They are meant to be protected. So we stood with our hands joined above the sleeping city, And when Claire leaned her head against my shoulder, I stayed very still. Not because I didn't want more, but because I wanted her to know more would never be demanded. After a while, she whispered, "I'm scared this only feels beautiful because tonight was awful." "That's possible," I said. She lifted her head. "You're supposed to say no. I'd rather tell you the truth. And the truth is? The truth is, I've cared about you for a long time, but you had a bad night. A brutal one. So if this is just a safe place to land, I can be that and not ask it to become anything else." Claire looked at me under the roof lights, her hair still damp from the mist, her eyes tired and open. "You really mean that?" "I do." She turned back toward the river. "Simon would have made me pay for a sentence like that." "I'm not Simon." "No," she said softly. "You're Miles." The way she said my name felt like a hand placed carefully over an old bruise. I walked her to her car just after midnight. She hugged me before she got in, arms around my waist, cheek against my chest. It was not a dramatic embrace. No swelling music. No rain returning on cue. Just two adults in a museum parking lot, holding on for a little longer than strangers would. "Text me when you get home," I asked. She smiled. "You too." That night, I lay awake until my phone lit up. Home, door locked, makeup mostly removed. Still embarrassed, but less alone. "Thank you for being my table." I stared at the message for a long time before answering. Anytime. Then I deleted it. "You never have to sit alone if I'm nearby." I deleted that too. Too much. Too soon. Finally, I wrote, "I'm glad you asked." Her reply came a minute later. "Me too." We moved slowly after that. Not painfully slow, not pretending there was nothing between us. Just careful. We met for coffee the next Saturday in daylight, where nothing could be mistaken for rescue. We talked about ordinary things, her students, my museum exhibits, the best fries in town, whether high school Miles would have survived a smartphone era. "He would have posted one sad sketch and vanished into the woods," Claire said. Accurate. She blocked Simon's number that afternoon while sitting across from me. Her thumb hovered for only a second before she pressed the button. Then she exhaled like someone setting down a box she'd carried for miles. On our third real date, I took her to the train exhibit at the museum after hours. Not the roof, not yet. I showed her the bench where the elderly woman sat every Tuesday for her late husband. Claire ran her fingers along the polished wood. "That's what I want," she said. "A bench? A love that leaves somewhere to sit." The first time I kissed her was not under stars or in a restaurant or beside a dramatic river. It was in the parking lot of a grocery store 2 months later, after we ran into Adrian Cole in the cereal aisle. He saw Claire. She saw him. For one heartbeat, her hand went cold in mine. Then she squared her shoulders and said, "I hope Tessa is doing well." Adrian blinked, mumbled something, and disappeared toward frozen foods. Claire watched him go, then turned to me with astonishment in her face. "I didn't shrink," she said. "No," I said. "You didn't." She laughed, bright and disbelieving, and kissed me right there between a cart return and a minivan with a bumper sticker about honor roll students. It was perfect. 6 months later, Claire came with me to my high school reunion. The gym smelled exactly the same, which felt illegal. Someone had hung silver streamers from the basketball hoops, and a playlist from our senior year made everyone briefly believe they still had knees from 2009. Claire wore blue that night. At one point, she pulled me toward the corner where the prom backdrop had once stood. "Was this where you hung the lights?" she asked. "Approximately." She looked up at the ceiling. "I danced under something you made and never knew." "You were busy being popular. I was busy being scared in prettier shoes." I took her hand. "We lost a lot of time." "We did," she said. Then she smiled. "But we found the table." By the following spring, she had a drawer at my apartment and strong opinions about where I kept the mugs. I knew which teas helped after hard days. She knew that when I got quiet, it usually meant I was building sentences too carefully in my head. We fought sometimes. Of course we did. But we learned to fight with the door open. No disappearing. No punishment disguised as silence. No making the other person beg to be understood. And every year on the anniversary of that awful first night, we went back to Marlowe's. The first time, Claire trembled before we walked in. So I asked, "Do you want to leave?" She shook her head. No, I want a better memory. We sat at the same table where I had been eating alone when she found me. Trevor still worked there, now with a manager's badge. And when he saw us holding hands, he grinned, like he'd personally written the ending. A year after that night, I asked Claire to marry me on the museum roof. No crowd, no violinist hiding behind a vent. Just the river, the city lights, and the woman who had once whispered, "Can I sit here?" Like she was asking for shelter instead of changing my life. I told her, "You can sit beside me for as long as you want." She cried then, but not from embarrassment. When she said yes, she stepped into my arms, and below us the river carried every old, lonely version of us away. Now, when people ask how we got together, Claire always says, "I got stood up." And I always add, "Best empty chair I ever saw." Because that's the truth. In her most humiliating moment, she looked across a crowded restaurant and found the boy who had loved her quietly. And this time, when she asked if she could sit with me, I was finally brave enough to make room. If you've ever been the person sitting alone or the one quietly hoping to be someone's safe place, tell me in the comments. I'd like to know I'm not the only one who believes the right person can still pull out a chair. What would you have done if something like "my high school crush" was stood up on a date? Then she whispered, "Can I sit here?" Happened to you? And have you ever mistaken kindness for something your heart was too afraid to name? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.